Welcome back, HC Nation. This is Zach Edwards with another episode of the Adventure Box Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. It's all brought to you by Historical Conquest. It's a great game that teaches history. You don't need to know anything about history in order to play. You just have fun, and you're actually going to learn history at the same time. Now, going into what we're going to be talking about today, we're going into one of the wars that's not talked about enough. And this is really what really changed the United States and also proved who the United States was and that they could actually fight against the other empires out there, or the empires out there, such as the British Empire. Now, this is essential to understand this war. So we're going to go through it. We're going to take a month to go through the whole war, things that leading up to it, things that happened during it, and things that happened afterwards. It's so important, and you need to hear this. So first off, we're talking about what led up to this war. Now, there might be some different ideas, of what led up to the war. I don't know why that popped up. But we're going to talk about two specific things. The Napoleonic War in Europe. Now, wait a second. Why would a war in Europe have to do with the United States? Well, it's very, very interesting, and you won't doubt or question why after I explain it to you. The second thing is the growing resistance of Native American tribes during this time. Now, of course, anyone can understand why there's increased resistance during this time. I mean, you're being pushed out of your houses. Of course, you're going to fight back. But all these things together, even though they didn't exactly have anything to do with the British attacking the United States, they all did, through different reasons, different things, made them all part of this movement at the time. So, European wars, Native American resistance, and the American expansion and how it collided in North America. That's what we're going to be talking about. So this is a story of global warfare. This is like the second real World War. So World War Real 2. This is the second one that's the real full-on global war. Now, the first one, we talked about it, was the French and Indian War, when it started off with the succession of the War of Austrian Succession. This next one, which then led up to the French and Indian War, this one was the Napoleonic War, which then led up to the War of 1812. Yeah, there's some really good connections we're going to have to make in order to make this make sense. So let's go into the Napoleonic War and its global impact. So the Napoleonic War was started by this guy. Who is it? That's right. That is Napoleon. It's one of the most famous illustrations of Napoleon. Now, everyone says he was really short, but if you know anything about history, most people in Europe and even America were short. Interesting how that is. And the average height actually increased. But Napoleon was known as a mid to shorter person. Now, between 1803 and 1815, Europe was engulfed in the Napoleonic War. It was a series of military campaigns led by Napoleon Bonaparte, this guy. Now, he rose from basically being a general to becoming the Emperor of France. If you're listening to our other podcasts, you're going to learn about Rome. These happen, what we're doing today, Mondays and Wednesdays. It's all going to be about War of 1812. Then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we go into ancient Rome, where we're talking about actual emperors. Rome was just full of emperors. Now, we called them Caesars, but there were actually emperors and there were Caesars. There's a little difference between the two. But when it came to Napoleon, he wanted to be known as an emperor, which means he wanted to take over all of Europe. Basically, close to a Hitler without the mass genocide. So Napoleon was a little bit different than, say, like Hitler, who was in Germany trying to take over Europe. Napoleon was an emperor that wanted to take over the land and bring in those people. into the government, not just annihilate certain types of people. So this ambition was enormous. This was so much bigger than just one person. And he wasn't the first one. Remember, every civilization before, every major civilization that we talk about, Egypt, Persia, Babylon or Mesopotamia, Greece, and also Rome, all of them were empire builders. They wanted to build an empire. Great Britain became an empire. They said that the sun never stops shining, or the sun never sets on the British Empire. It's because it was so massive. So these are people that have their homeland or home area and expand it from there, taking over other people. Some might say that Putin is an empire builder, or trying to be, but he can't really get it past there. He can't get it all the way into Europe because so many people are fighting back, being mostly Europe and the United States are fighting against it. So again, his ambition was extreme at this point. He wanted to reshape Europe and spread the revolution. So all the ideas from the French Revolution and those ideals, and basically crush monarchies that opposed him. Monarchies around Europe. That was a major one goal, is to take over land and kick out the monarchies. So, interesting, Napoleon wasn't just fighting for his French neighbors. He was challenging global order, which is why people are talking about it, like why people talk about him. He was a challenge to global order. Okay, so France, let's go over a few points. France fought against an ever-shifting coalition of groups when it came to trade and military strength and just different powers. Now, these are the main ones, and I'll bring a picture for this. Let's bring up the next picture. You had the Empire of Austria. You had the Kingdom of Prussia. You had the Duchy of Warsaw. Now remember, the Kingdom of Prussia was actually fighting into Austria during this War of Austrian Succession, during the French and Indian War, about 60 years before. Let's see, 70 years before, during the French and Indian War, maybe 80 years before. No, yeah, it was. It's about the start of the 1700s. But you also had now the duchies of Warsaw coming in and taking up some of that land. So Prussia is being shrunk at that point. Austria is also being shrunk by the Confederation of the Rhine. Then you had France, you had Spain, you had Portugal, you had the United Kingdom. At that point it was the United Kingdom. Kingdom of Sweden, there's Denmark, and of course the Russian Empire. Now, we're not going to be totally talking about this as much, but you have this stretch down here. Who is this? The Ottoman Empire, the Muslim fighters trying to spread into Europe. And so they were trying to take up more force. So they came through Greece and conquered the whole thing, and were moving west. So that's all the things that are happening at this point. You have all of these different kingdoms and empires that were trying to, that were trying to take over. Now, the wars didn't stay in just Europe. Let me put this way. It affected all the trade routes, all the colonies, and all the alliances around the world. So it wasn't just in Europe. So you can somewhat understand this. Oh, okay, there's a little bit more of a stretch of why this would influence the War of 1812. Yes, but we're not there yet. How about naval battles? Okay, naval battles became crucial all throughout the Atlantic Ocean, the Mediterranean. It was everywhere. So it was between France and it was about Britain. Why? Because they were two superpowers. Basically, even though it was the United Kingdom, so being a kingdom, it was not actually a kingdom. They were more of an empire, even though their name didn't say it. And you have the Empire of France. Sorry, it's over here. I should actually change my monitors around so I can do this properly. But I keep going. And then you have, you basically have these two kingdoms fighting each other because these other ones basically became aligned with France. So these ones did not want to fight them, and became either neutral or siding with France. So then it became a war between France and Great Britain. This is where we really start to get the connection between it. Why? Because America is caught in the crossfires. Okay, so America is like way, 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 way far away. So how in the world did the United States become part of this? Well, the United States was still young. It was at this time that Madison said, we are neutral. Actually, let's see. George Washington first said it. We are neutral in all wars. Then, after him, John Adams, we are neutral in all wars. James Madison comes in, neutral on all wars. We are not playing a part. We are building our country. So, it basically said we are neutral in everything. We will trade with you, but we will not fight for you or with you. So it found itself in the crosshairs between two major global powers in this conflict. Great Britain, up here, and France, right here. So, yes, there's the start of the connections. Both those kingdoms were against each other. The United States was very loyal to France because they had helped them to overcome the British Empire in the United States, and what would become the United States. Then you had the United Kingdom, who became their greatest trading partner. So two frenemies, friends, and at the same time, they were fighting each other, asking for the United States to play a part. Well, they said again, neutral, not happening. We're not getting into this. We don't want to be part of this. So France, well, let's go with Britain first. Britain basically enforced a naval blockade and used its navy to impress American sailors. Wait, impress them? Yeah, we're so good, you want to be impressed by us. No, 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 not impressed. Impressed. I-M-P-R-E-S-S, which means the British boarded U.S. vessels and took their sailors if their sailors had any kind of citizenship with Great Britain. If they were British, not loyalists, citizens at any point, they could seize them and use them in the battle. Okay, wait a second. That's horrible. Those are American citizens. Well, no, they're also a joint. They had dual citizenship, or they were even born in Great Britain. Those could be clawed back into naval service against your will. They seized them and forced them to serve in the Royal Navy. So our citizens in the United States are being taken. Wait a second. That's not right. Well, let's go to France first before we go any further. France, under Napoleon, imposed its own continental system, basically targeting British trade, even impacting the United States. Okay, so that's why they couldn't fight him. They couldn't fight France to stop them from taking over the trade routes. So the United States, even though it's a baby country, as some would say, or if it's a toddler country, it was being picked on by these two great superpowers because it would not side with one or the other. At the same time, if they sided with one or the other, it would get even worse. So again, I forgot, before we got to James Madison, I forgot Thomas Jefferson. It was Thomas Jefferson that actually said, we're neutral. It was James Madison that would follow that. So let's go into Thomas Jefferson. In 1807, President Thomas Jefferson tried to avoid war by passing the Embargo Act. So what's the Embargo Act? Embargo Act basically banned trade with all foreign nations. Whoa! Wait a second. How in the world is the United States supposed to bring in money, considering most of their money was not from taxes on their people? It was from tariffs coming into those countries. If you know what's happening today, you have our president, our current president, Donald Trump, who actually put tariffs on all other countries in basically the whole world. Now, why did he do that? Okay, so it's a little bit different than what was happening before. This reasoning for Donald Trump is basically all of these other countries have tariffs on us, which a tariff is if I try to sell something to, say, Spain, they say, well, that product is going to have a 25% tax. And you're going to pay that to our government if you're going to sell that product in the country. Now, they don't actually tax the United States. No, they tax their own people. Why is that? Because Spain, say I was building cars, Spain has their own car company that they're going to try to help. They're going to try to push them up. So all of a sudden, Spain says, I'm putting a 25% tariff on everything that you sent into Spain if it has to do with a car company. Well, I'm going to say, wait a second, that's not right. You can't tax them more because they'll only buy the car that's made in Spain. Well, yes, they will. And the U.S. company will miss out. So that's why the tariffs are there. And the government of Spain, for every car that goes in there, 25% goes to the government of Spain. Wow. So Spain quite liked that because they were making money off of that. Well, what's happening today? So Spain has tariffs on the United States products. France has tariffs on the United States products. The United Kingdom has tariffs on the United States products. So if you want to buy a Beamer in the United States, you pay about a 2.5% tariff up until Saturday. Last Saturday is when, or I guess, yeah, Saturday before last, because we're doing this 1 week in advance, this video. Then you are actually going to be paying 25% more for that car, the BMW, because it's European made and they have a tax on you, a tariff on you. And if you're going to send products into Europe, you're going to be taxed on that. Your product is going to be taxed. The people in Europe are going to be taxed to buy that product. So instead of buying your product, they're going to buy the local product, which sounds all good and everything. A little bit of protectionism, which is actually a word in economics. Protectionism. This is the type of thing that's basically sent Trump into saying, no more. If you want to have this tariff on here, great, we're going to tariff you as well. It's called a reciprocal tariff, which means they tax us, we tax them. Now, in Trump's equations, when it comes to finding out exactly how much of a tariff they have, he basically took not just the tariff that they were charging us, but how little they were buying from the United States and how much we were buying from them. And he added that to the equation. Okay, so now we got a bigger, quote-unquote, tariff, the amount that's being taxed on our products. So they have to come to the negotiating table and say, okay, we will drop our tariffs, even zeroing them out, and we will also buy more products from the United States. That's it. And by that, Trump can say, now no one's exactly knows how he's going to respond, but he's going to then say, done deal. I'm going to drop our tariffs to 0. Or I'm going to drop our tariffs to 10%. Or we're going to drop it down to 2.5 again. Depends on the situation. Again, he's the commander-in-chief. I just hope that what he's doing is actually smart and actually works. If it doesn't, we're in trouble. Now, here's a part where it does not work. And then we're going to get back to the War of 1812. This is where what's happening right now will not work. Canada decides, well, we're not going to change anything because there's senators in the United States who are fighting against the president's own plans. So in the end, the Senate is going to claw back that responsibility for tariffs, and all of a sudden, no more tariffs for Canada. Canada's like, ha, we win, and you suck, America. Well, okay, maybe they don't say we suck, but the problem is that we are still going to be paying, sending products over, and they're going to tariff those products. Or say with Mexico or Canada, they still allow fentanyl, drugs into our country, or those coming in illegally into our country. It says, hey, we're not doing anything because the Senate backed us up and not the president. Wait. So the question is, do we back the president's plan and maybe it works? Or do we go with the Senate and the Democrats and all of a sudden say, no, you're not going to do this. We're going to pull those away and we're going to stay with the status quo where the United States is losing hand over fist everything that we do. Our manufacturing is in other countries. Of course, it goes down to Mexico, Vietnam, China, goes everywhere else except in the United States. So what do you want? What would you want? Let's go back to the War of 1812. All of a sudden, Jefferson says, okay, Embargo Act. No more trading with foreign countries. Ouch. You know how much that really, really hurts? If you have products that are coming out of the UK that you really need, sorry, you don't get those. If you're a manufacturer that needs products coming out of the UK to make your goods, sorry, you don't have those. You have to make them in the United States. Well, what if we don't know how to make them? What if we don't have the minerals to make them? What if we don't have, and so on and so forth. This is why people got mad at Thomas Jefferson. The result, economic disaster at home, especially in the northern merchants, you know, not the slave owning merchants, the northern merchants, because there has now been a separation where the northern states are basically anti-slavery. The southern states are now pro-slavery. So the U.S. was struck. It was stuck. It was too weak to fight, too proud to accept these violations to them. You know, the impressing our own citizens to work for the Navy or stopping the trade because of France. Couldn't do anything. So the U.S. was stuck. What do you do? The pressure was building from up above, from down below. The frontier was about to explode. This is where the Native American resistance comes in. The problem is, who was supporting the Native Americans at this time? Oh, look at that. It's Canada. Because who owned Canada? Great Britain owned Canada. So Great Britain was sending goods to the Native Americans to fight back against the westward expansion. Also angering our government when it comes to Great Britain. Why would we do anything for you? Which also came to the point of people are like, well, maybe I do support the Embargo Act, at least against UK, because they are making these clashes happen. So while the US was clashing with European powers on the sea, it was expanding westward into the lands, into territories that were the Native Americans, and they had long called home. So I'm not saying which one's right and which one's wrong. I'm giving you the facts. This is all we do on this podcast. Okay, so the Northwest territories, modern day Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, those places, became all of a sudden a flashpoint. Land-hungry settlers were pouring out because one thing, if there's an embargo act where you cannot get your goods from these areas, you have to expand because you have to set up new factories. You have to set up new supply chains. You have to find new products to sell your people if you cannot buy them from any other country. This is why we were in a bottleneck for what was about to happen. Now, the native treaties that we had set up were often ignored and manipulated. With people going west, they're going into Native American land. So, treaties were ignored. They were changed. The tribal nations saw their land being taken away, piece by piece. But some native leaders weren't willing to let that happen quietly. Let's talk about one of them. And you actually have cards on this in our game. Tecumseh. There you go. Thank you. Tecumseh and his confederacy. So one of the most powerful voices of resistance during this time came from Tecumseh. He was a Shawnee chief. And also his brother, Kenskwa Tawa, known as the Prophet. I'm just going to say the Prophet because his name's a little bit harder for me to say, and I'm going to butcher it, and I don't want to butcher it. Okay, so you had Tecumseh and the Prophet. So together, they built a pan-Indian confederacy. Remember a confederacy? It's a group of individual groups all coming together as a collective to fight back. It was a movement, unified tribes across the Midwest and even the South. It rejected dependency on American goods and alcohol, which at the point before this confederacy, they were all about, especially the alcohol, because it made them almost compliant. And I don't mean that in disrespect, but the alcohol brought them down to a level that the settlers were on equal ground. Because before, just me personally, the Native Americans were higher up than a lot of the colonists. Yes, the colonists had guns, but the Native Americans could do some great deal of damage to anyone. You add alcohol to them, there's an addictive, they say there's an addictive gene inside Native Americans that will actually make them addicted to alcohol more than normal. And so you had a very complacent set of tribes. Well, Tecumseh, he actually said, no more drinking. You're done. We're done with drinking. No more drinking. He restored traditional religious and governance and the order in the native tribes. And he also stopped the land sales and defended territories by forcing it if needed. So by force. Now, their spiritual and political capital was a place called Provincetown. Now this is where, again, the prophet was actually set. And it was near the Tippecanoe River. Now in 1811, when Tecumseh was away, so he left, he was actually out recruiting allies. The U.S. General William Henry Harrison led an attack on Provincetown. Now, there's a lot more to it. It was not just a simple attack. It was also the Native Americans that were there, the prophet, fighting back. Now, according to history, William Henry Harrison was actually out there to talk. He was not out there to attack. The prophet sent out a group to go attack. Now, this actually created the Battle of Tippecanoe, which basically annihilated the town. The U.S. claimed victory, but the battle basically rallied Native American resistance. Now, Tecumseh, not having much luck with what he was trying to do, he then turned to the British for support. The British got involved. From the British, still active in Canada, they supported Native resistance and served with them with strategic goals, gave them supplies, weapons, and food, gave them safe haven if they were trying to run away. They had British forts that would become the United States. Tecumseh and other leaders formed a military alliance with the British commanders. Okay, this is going to start up a hornet's nest inside the U.S. government. To Native nations, Britain seemed to be like the lesser of two evils, and perhaps the last chance to stop the U.S. expansion. Now, this alliance wasn't just political, it was military. It basically, in the coming war of 1812, Native warriors would fight alongside the British forces in battles of from Detroit to the Great Lakes and all the way southward. Through Tecumseh's Confederacy, they would suffer major blows, heavy blows, with his death at the Battle of the Thames, which is 1813, again after the war begins, 1812, and years before the War of 1812, they were basically marked with some of the most organized Native resistance in U.S. history. We talked a little bit about it last month when we talked about the mixing pot. We're not going to go into all of them because we already did a ton of them. But I want to let you know all these things so you can actually know where this is all coming from. Basically, they made an alliance with the British. The British are the ones that attacked the United States. Why did that happen? So, we're going to talk about that more in the next video on Wednesday. But before we shove off, before we close with you, I want to talk to you about some of the things that we had just talked about and recap some of the things that we learned, and then give you an engagement question that we'd love for you to put in the comments below. So here we go. Before the first shot in the War of 1812 was fired, the world was already at war, whether it was in Europe. Oh, I didn't even show you some of these. Okay, so these are some of the kingdoms. We went over them slightly. This is interesting, if it actually works. Land claimed by the tribes. So these are all the lands claimed by the tribes prior to 1812. And it's not working. Darn it. Okay. It's actually a GIF or a video that would show you how much the land was lost over time. But it goes quite quickly. And so, okay. So those are the lands, and those are the different tribes that claimed the lands around 1810, I'd say. Okay. And last thing, during the War of 1812, Russia owned Alaska, Britain owned Canada, and going into the United States a little bit, or what would become the United States, of Washington and Oregon. The Spanish actually owned much of Mexico coming up. This is the Louisiana Purchase that does not happen yet, but it will be happening. And so on and so forth. And then you have Spain also collecting Florida as well on their side. So, three things to talk about. The Americans stayed neutral. It was the test. Basically, who were they going to side with? Britain or France? So, what'd they do? They put greater pressure on them. Britain impressing the citizens and supplying the Native Americans with power, with weaponry, food, safe shelter. And then you had France, who basically cut off a lot of the trade with Great Britain. Well, and also the trade with the French during this time. So if they couldn't trade with them, what do we do? The Embargo Act. And that wasn't a very good thing as well. It did not help as much. But now you have the Native Americans who saw their land vanishing in the form of powerful alliances. They formed powerful alliances to push back. And the British, always watching from Canada, saw that the last foothold in North America, they needed to defend it. The War of 1812 wouldn't just be about ships and flags. It would be about land, legacy, and power. So here's your question. What do you think was the greatest factor driving the U.S. towards war? Was it British interference on the sea? Was it British interference with the Native Americans? Was it the French and their trade situation? Or was it the rising frontier tensions that were happening not just against the Native Americans, but also in Canada? So this is what we're going to be talking about this whole month. Wait till Wednesday when you actually hear what our responses are to all these things happening. Because I told you about the Embargo Act. That's the only thing I told you about. There's a lot more coming. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking about James Madison's part as well. Thank you again, and hope to see you next time. Take care, everyone. Take care. Bye. If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow, actually. Take care. Bye.